So, all right. So this is some data that I put together in April of 2013. It's like April or May of 2013. And the question that I wanted to answer was, these open source ecosystems, like we have all this data about how fast they're growing, and it looks really erratic, and it looks like not that predictable. And a lot of that is because the graphs that you're used to seeing are the absolute number of packages, right? So for one thing, they don't really compare very well between ecosystems because like the average size of packages doesn't really line up between ecosystems. And another thing about them is that once you look at everything on that scale, it always looks like so incremental and so weird, and it's really hard to quantify the difference between them. So what I did instead was I looked at every package system and I said, okay, every quarter of every year, how much did it grow as a percentage of itself? And then I charted that. And one of the interesting things about that data that I figured out was that there aren't really ecosystems that are dying. Like every ecosystem has a pretty steady growth pattern and has maintained like whatever growth pattern that it has right now for like the last few years at least. So essentially what ends up happening, sorry, my phone is going off. What ends up happening is that a new project comes out, it gathers a bunch of people and a bunch of interest, and it grows like crazy, and then the level of growth levels off at that point, and then it maintains as a percentage of itself, which is kind of insane. So Node, for instance, grows at roughly 20% a quarter. So that's every 3 months, however big the Node community is, it grows at about 20% of that, which means that every quarter it gets that much harder to grow by that, but we still continue to grow by that. And that growth rate is actually higher than any other ecosystem. So I built this graph that basically predicted the number of modules in each ecosystem in an absolute number like you're used to seeing for the next few years. So last year we reached 100,000 modules, and this predicted it by like roughly about a few days accuracy. So that's kind of phenomenal. That's like more than a year later, it was that accurate. And it's still pretty accurate to today. And it shows that this year we'll see 200,000 modules, and the very early next year we'll see 300. That's pretty phenomenal, and it's all kind of holding up. So this is what I usually talk about. Like I go around the world and I read these blog posts about like how amazing Node is and how it's growing. But a lot of what this talk is about is actually this other graph. This is the number of contributions to Node itself, to Node core. And as you can see, it's actually, it has this dips and valleys, but it started to go down in around 2012, and then sharply declined in 2014, very sharply. And there's every reason in the world for this graph not to look like this. Like there are more people using Node, more people care about Node, more businesses are running it. Everybody has all these incentives to work on Node and to do stuff with it. Why aren't we seeing more people come to it? Like, if the excuse was, well, it's harder to contribute to Node. It's harder to make code changes as the project matures. Well, it would have to be 20% harder every quarter just to keep up with the level of interest in Node in general. So that's definitely not the answer. This graph is way more depressing. This is the number of stable releases per year. So as you can see, we go up and then we don't go up as much as we probably should have, and then we sharply decline to close to 0. And who knows if we'll have any this year. So I don't want to spend too much time thinking about, why did this happen? Like, I think we know some of the reasons why it happened. But what we really want to do is look at, OK, what is working in the Node ecosystem? Like the graph that's going crazy big, like why is it going crazy big? What are the things that are working there? And how do we port them so that we can fix this problem, right? How do we fix it? So this is sort of like a rough graph of what the level up ecosystem looks like. So level up is it's basically a module for you to write your own database using LevelDB. And one of the reason why I show this off is that the level up ecosystem itself is sort of like a microcosm of what the Node ecosystem looks like, right? So there's Node here, and then there are dependencies and potentially even things swapping out behind Node. And then on top of it, there are just multi-layers of dependencies, right? Like if you look at a dependency graph from NPM, it just shoots out in all these directions, right? And all these building blocks kind of stack on top of each other. And so, but Level Up, has a really healthy core. It has a bunch of people that contribute to it and work on it regularly. It has regular releases. Like we can look at some of the things that they're doing, and they have to maintain the same kinds of API predictability and stability that Node does. So what are they doing? So Level Up is maintained by this guy, Rod Veg. So if you've done much Node stuff, you've probably seen Rod Veg on something. Our Veg is up in your modules somewhere. If you look through your dependency graph, you're going to see him. He's a very prolific Node programmer, lives in Australia, works for NodeSource. So he started Level Up, and Level Up was the first project that he moved to this model that he calls open source. Open being an acronym for, I think open is not an acronym. I don't know. But the basic principle of open source is summed up in one of the lines in the contribution file. So this is one of the sentences in the contribution file that just says, individuals making significant and valuable contributions are given commit access to the project to contribute as they see fit. This project is more like an open wiki than a standard guarded open source project. So what this means is that if you go and you send a pull request to Level Up, there's a ton of people that are committers that are going to talk about it with you. And then if it's accepted, if it turns into something that's worth actually taking into the project, you'll just be added as a committer right away. And there's a couple reasons for that. Like, one is that what are we really risking by adding you as a contributor, right? Like, this isn't 1995. Like, we're not using CVS. I don't have to like grab some crazy Perl script to back out your code. Like, this is Git. Like, you can't really make mistakes that are irrevocable in Git. We're not giving you access to publish everything yet. Like, we're just giving you access to look at pull requests. So what the model really does is that it adds a lot of people that are given a sort of shared sense of ownership over the project. Now that they've contributed something, they also feel like, oh, well, I should comment on pull requests and work with other people's code. They're now watching the project as soon as you add them as a contributor. And what ends up happening is you have the system where everybody, including the person who started the project, sends a pull request, and they talk about it for a little while, and stuff gets accepted. So you get this balance of stability and shared ownership and contributions between all these different people. And most of the time, you actually reach a very easy consensus in these kinds of models. So another wildly successful thing in Node has been Node School. So Node School has been teaching brand new people Node a lot. It's been taking pretty tough to handle subjects and creating tutorials out of them. But basically, how Node School started was at NodeConf in 2013. Everybody was doing these sort of hands-on tutorials, and Substack was like, I'm not going to make slides. That's dumb. I'm going to write a module. So he wrote a module that interactively taught people how streams work. And Rod and Tim Oxley were so excited about it that they took that approach and wrote a couple more. And so by a couple months later, when NodeConf EU rolled around in Ireland, there were enough of these that we were like, man, we've got to build a website for just all of these tutorials that we have now. And so Brian Brennan and Max put that together and called it Node School. And shortly after they put that together, we started to see like a real community build up around these tutorials. Like, more people were looking to write them, more people were interested in maintaining them and modifying them. And eventually, I logged this issue where I said, like, hey, does anybody want to run like a little local workshop where they use the Node School material to teach people in their local community how Node works? And so this thread just proceeds to blow the fuck up. Like, I mean, tons of people are like, yes, I want to, like, yes. There's all these questions, there's all this feedback. I encourage people to come back with postmortems so they could say, what are the things that worked and didn't work, and we could iterate on, the sort of prescribed method for doing these after a while. And they also added all these great pictures from their meetups, right? And so we get to see all over the world where people are using these things and really building on each other. And this goes on for, I'd say, about 6 or 7 months. And it's growing really steadily. Like, we're doubling the number of them each month. And then it just sort of plateaus. Like, the ones that are running stay up and running for the most part, and they keep coming back and doing more. But we're not getting new people running new meetups. And when we went around and tried to think about what can we do, what we figured out was that there's a limited number of people that know enough already and feel like they have a support system in place enough already in their local community that they can bite this off and do it, right? That they're comfortable doing that. And there's a set amount of them, and we had kind of saturated that, right? So Max, who was maintaining it at the time, what he did, which was just phenomenal, was he said, okay, how do we lower the barrier to entry for people running these, right? So he wrote up all of the best practices that we'd figured out in that thread. He created a GitHub org so that there was an organizer's repo where you could get help from other organizers. And also, as soon as you said, hey, I want to run one of these, you were added as an owner of the org. And so you were sort of like pushed into and encouraged to like go off and do this. Each local meetup got their own repo. And what we did was we encouraged those local meetups to add everyone that attended as an owner of the repo. So there's like a team that's just for that locality. And so that means that these little local repos ended up becoming like help centers when people would go home. And one of the reasons why they're asking these here and not on like the regular Node IRC channel and stuff like that is that they don't know any of those people. Like these are people new to programming or very new to Node. They don't feel comfortable asking, the world of Node programmers how to do something, but they feel really comfortable with all the people that they met like last week. So they ask all of these really beginner rudimentary questions, and then all of the other people in that community are now watching the repo, and they build this really great support structure. So after we did this, Max basically got the train rolling again, and now we have more and more Node schools all the time. And if you look now, there's so many local chapters, and I'm an owner of the org, right? So every time there's a new repo, I get added to it, and then I have to be like, fuck, I don't speak Chinese. I need to, what am I going to do with these emails about that are in Spanish? Now we're actually in, for the first time, I think ever in all of the Node documentation, other than just the core API documentation, Max took a stab at first just translating the website. So if the Node School website is available in other languages, how many people do we get from there? And then how do we internationalize all the individual tutorials, and how do we build up that community? And that's why we're now seeing so many of these repositories are actually in the native languages rather than our language. And when we saw the one pop up in Tokyo, they just kept speaking English because they're used to just doing stuff in English when they're on internet and on GitHub. But then one popped up in Osaka, and that one is all in Japanese now. And it's really cool to see us get all these people involved in the local community. Another thing Max put together, which I believe Jacob already mentioned, is Oakland.js. So Oakland.js is not like this meetup. There's no talks. There's no business cards. It's just a bunch of people at a bar out on picnic tables talking. And it's really just a social atmosphere for our local community. And we've been really aggressive, I'd say, about getting people to come out that aren't already JavaScript programmers, that aren't already Node programmers. We've gotten people who are teachers, people that work at City Hall. We've people that just found out about JavaScript in their local community. And what it does is it really just makes everybody friendly and creates a supportive environment. And the really weird thing that we figured out about it, and this is all Max, is that if you do it weekly, it's actually easier than doing it monthly. When you do something monthly, it's this big chore, and you got to get all these people together, and there's got to be a facilitator. If you do it every week, it's just a thing that people show up to at their local bar. It's not a big deal if you don't show up. It's not a big deal if you do. You don't have to harangue somebody and make sure that they're there. It works really well. And as you can see, we've had them. The one that happened during JS Fest was 100 people, and they've been as low as 4. It's really great. Okay, so that's all fine and good, but what does it have to do with actually fixing Node and io.js and all that? So this is all sort of to say that the things that have worked in the ecosystem that have allowed it to grow and that have spawned all of this growth have a lot to do with all of you. So there's a way for every single person in this room to participate in the larger ecosystem. With core, there's not a way for everybody here to participate. That hasn't existed for a while. And in the ecosystem, there's this diversity of participation, and as you participate more, you get more ownership, and you grow inside of that community, and you take on more responsibility. That also doesn't really exist in core. There's this huge barrier to entry to just even getting in the door, and then you get blessed as an apprentice or whatever, and then maybe you're a contributor, and then even if you're a contributor for 4 years, you can't update the website for a fucking release. It's absurd. So the key to doing all of this is finding ways for all of you to participate and also get that energy put into core. So I've talked a bit about locally. Like honestly, like all of you guys like actually live around here. But if you live like even shortly outside of the city, or fuck it, like if you live on the other side of the city, it's a pain to get over here. Like this sucks. Like do like Sunset JS like every week at some bar and get like the people in the Sunset going because it takes like an hour to get here from there. It's insane. I get here faster from Oakland. Another is like you can run a Node school. Like there aren't enough Node schools. In particular, like in San Francisco, I really feel like we could have Node schools that were not about any of the beginner materials. So like usually when you open up a Node school, you get like a ton of people that show up and all of them do learn you Node. Like they're all learning Node, they're all at the beginner level. But like here we could literally do one that was just like, we're gonna do level DB and functional programming. Like that's all that's happening. So like definitely do more of that. I think there are a few people in this room already doing it, but that doesn't matter. Do fucking more. Like we always need more. Another thing, I took a lot of the stuff that Max did with Node School, and I ported it to running like a one-day conference. So there's a great guide if you want to run a one-day conference, a one-day speaking series. Wherever you are, encourage your friends that live in other cities to do the same. I won't be running a JS Fest in San Francisco this year, so there won't be a one-shot in San Francisco this year that I run. So if you want to run a one-shot in San Francisco, go for it. The next thing is, so Node Forward is this initiative that a bunch of us created maybe 4 months ago now, 5 months ago, something like that. It's been a while. But the idea behind Node Forward was that we have problems in the Node community that stretch more than a single module. So how do we get a bunch of people together to work on those kinds of problems? And so far, it's been highly successful at getting a lot of people engaged in this process and getting more people on board and involved in fixing problems around core and also inside of the ecosystem. We've also been working with Joyent for a long time to try to move the project to a model where the contributors can actually run the project and that we can adopt some of these like more modern things. That process has been very slow, and eventually Fyodor, who writes like like a good chunk of the code in Node and in libuv, very prolific guy, he was just like, fuck it, table flip, and started landing his patches in a repo called io.js and an org called io.js. And within a few days, like everybody who landed patches in Node, except for Joyent, was just like, all right, I'm going to land my patches there now. So io.js has basically like adopted this open governance model. We have weekly public TC calls for the technical committee that runs it. We've already added 2 more technical committee members. We're adding like a shitload of contributors. Like it's going really well. So if you want to work directly in io.js, like really in Node core, you have those kinds of skills. You can now. There's like a path to succeeding in that. Also, if you want to fuck around with logos, like there's this thread where we just like everybody's adding a logo. So these are just a couple of them. There's like over 300. It's amazing. And I think what we're actually going to do is we're going to, for every release, we're going to take a different logo. So that'll be really fun, and like the release master can decide which logo. So here's some repos on Node Forward that you can check out if you're interested. One is called Welcome, which is basically trying to figure out what the new user experience is. Like somebody finds out about Node, like what are the resources that can help them learn it? Like how do they get involved? Like let's create that resource collaboratively. There's one called Help, which the mailing list sucks, so we're trying to see whatever we can do. Well, okay, you manage Help and the mailing list. Where should people send their questions?
Wherever they're most comfortable, Michael.
Right. So not the mailing list, unless you really care about fibers. If you have a question about fibers, you should definitely send it to the Node mailing list, though. Like that's where questions about fibers go to die. So there's another effort that we're putting together, which was Jacob's idea, actually, which was to try and create a system where people can sign up to mentor somebody who's new, and then we'll pair people that are new that want to have a mentor and get more involved in Node. And so right now, I think it's as simple as like, you add yourself to a README or a spreadsheet or something, and then like later somebody's like, hey, can you help me? Also, we want to have sort of more open discussions just about Node and Node Core, and so there's a discussions repo on Node Forward about that as well. On to io.js. So there's the actual io.js repo. So if you want to contribute Node to Node, this is how we pronounce it now. It's pronounced io.js, and you send your patch there. and then it will actually get reviewed, and might end up in a release this year. So the build system is like totally new. So the old build system was like stood up by Joint and entirely on Joint's infrastructure, and had a lot of warts and rough edges. And what we wanted to do was create a more robust build system that had resources donated from multiple vendors, so that it's not all on one vendor's infrastructure. And so Rod Veg has been leading the effort to build that out. It's going fantastic. If you have build expertise, like distributed build system expertise, they would love to have you. Also, if you happen to work at a company and you just keep racks of weird hardware around, we need some of the weirder hardware. There are these very expensive rack mount boxes that basically are the Raspberry Pi architecture, but at a higher clock speed. So we really need those for building the Raspberry Pi stuff because it takes for fucking ever. Voxer kicked in some Mac Minis so we can do the Mac builds. DigitalOcean's kicking in a bunch. It's great. If you're just a Node developer and you really feel like you have some input about the roadmap and where Node is heading, and you probably feel like nobody's ever listened to you before, we have a repo where we're collecting that kind of feedback. So one of the big threads is kind of the first one is what are your biggest pain points with Node? So that as we build out the roadmap for the next year of Node and where we're going to spend our time, we're actually solving the things that developers actually care about. So it's great for you to participate there if you can. I was put in charge of the website yesterday, and God help us, because I don't make pretty things. So if you want to help out with the website, please help me out. And I can't wait to hand that over to somebody else who's a designer. If you know designers that want to maintain a website, be great. So I don't know if you did, so a lot of people don't know this, but the streams implementation that ships in Node 10, the current stable version of Node, was written as an independent module called Readable Stream by Isaac. And for the longest time, it was just sort of sitting in Isaac's repo as Readable Stream. And then every once in a while, we'd sort of repackage that up, and then it would become streams again. But then you also had a bunch of people just relying on this module because they know that it fixes a couple bugs on the core stream implementation. So one of the things that io.js has done is that we've gotten much less weird about taking other people's modules and just saying this is the official thing. We're not going to manage this directly in core anymore. There's a community of people that want to manage this module. They're better at it than core. Just let them do that. That really hasn't been a possibility while it's been at Join for some reason. So the first one is that Isaac just sort of handed over Readable Stream to us. To io.js, and now there's a team managing the Readable Stream implementation. This includes trying to update this for the next version of streams that can handle some of the weird differences and with DOM streams or the W3C streams that are happening right now. So Dominic Denicola is working on streams for the browser, and that's in an active standard. And there are some really important differences with Node streams, and we're going to have to figure out how to rectify those. So that work is happening right now in Readable Stream. So if you're a stream nerd, help us out. So Nan, terribly named module, Rod. Nan is actually, it's a way for you to build native add-ons without binding directly to V8. So if you write C++ add-ons, or if you use C++ add-ons, you notice that they break tremendously between versions of Node. That's because V8 breaks their API all the time. So what Nan tries to do is sit between all these different versions of Node and V8 and give you an API that you can implement at least most of a native module. And if you can't implement all of it, that's OK. Using a mix of this and native V8 is still better than just only building to native V8. And again, now that we're in this much more kind of collaborative environment, we can semi-officially bless stuff like this and say this is the prescribed way now to build native add-ons if you can. Don't use this other thing that we're off building. So yeah, releases, because that's the whole fucking point of this whole thing, is to actually have releases. So 1.0 is coming out next week on Fedora's birthday, January 13th. Woo! All right. So basically, everything you've heard about for like a year and a half about O12, most of that was cut from O12 and from this. But all the things that are actually going to ship in O12 will be in here. There's also a lot of other tiny things you probably don't care about, but the really big one is that we've taken like the latest V8. So there's just a shitload of ES6 features in there. Like V8 has gotten much more aggressive about taking and putting out from behind flags a lot of V8 features. So now those will be available without like a lot of them without flags and some of them behind flags, and almost none of them behind an entire recompile as they are today on the current stable node. So that's going to be a big one. Also, we're switching to semver, because fuck that other thing. So that's why the first release is 1.0.0, and then we'll go from there for 1.1.1. Even though it's 1.0.0, it is a beta release. Like, don't treat it, like, don't run this in production on like day one. Like, you know, you're going to cry. But yeah, that's it. I'm Mikeal, and I'm the Director of Evangelism for DigitalOcean. And I can take any questions, as long as they're not like really, like, don't make me say awful things about other people.